guys, welcome back. I'm Chef Robert Ramsey, and as you guys know, we're going to be working through rice and grains today for our lesson. And at this point, you guys should be pretty well versed in the materials on rice and grains. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out by going through a review of all of the materials that you guys have already covered before we get into the sort of fun and exciting part, which is talking about the group project that you guys are going to be doing together, which is entirely creative and allows you guys to come up with your own plan for what you guys are going to want to cook. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and get started on our review first. And what I want to do, this is kind of just a really quick, fun video. It's a minute long. And it is just some quick reminder facts about the structure of grains, because again, that's going to be one of the big concepts that we're focusing on today. All right, so we're just going to start with this. Do you guys know Alton Brown? Food member? Yeah. He's great. He tends to add a good comedic kick to having a really good food science background. So we're going to look at some grains with him right now.
Have a wheat kernel, also referred to as a wheat berry. It's kind of small, but if you look closely, you can see absolutely nothing. There. That's better. Totally fake, but better. Now, after the outer hull is removed, you're left with a trio of products. First, there's the outer bran layers, which comprise about 14% of the kernel. There you've got vitamins, fiber, especially B vitamins, and a little bit of protein. Now, inside, we have the endosperm, which makes up a whopping 80% of the total weight. It contains really the lion's share of the proteins and carbohydrates, some iron, some other vitamins. And then, at only about 2% of the weight, you've got the germ. That's the actual plant embryo, if you will, which under natural conditions would sprout.
Okay, so what are we looking at right now? Does anybody know? In terms of the state that the grain is in?
The whole grain?
Exactly, the whole grain. So when we talk about a whole grain, what does that mean? We have what parts? There you go. Okay, so we have the three components that make up the whole grain.
Well, because of course, it's styrofoam. Now, if you finally grind wheat kernels, you of course produce flour.
Okay, what do we call taking a whole grain kernel and grinding it down? What does that process refer to as? Charlie? Milling, exactly. Okay, great. So these are just some of the key concepts that we're going to go through today and kind of get you guys ready for your project. All right, so the first thing, let's just together define what is a grain. What do you guys think? Any ideas? Charlie?
So going through the PowerPoint, it said it was a seed.
Yeah, it's a seed. And what kind of seed? Is it like the seed of an apple?
Seed of a grass.
Yeah, exactly. It's the seed of a grass. It's the seed of a grass that's been cultivated for human consumption. Okay? And that leads us to the next question. What are some examples of the seeds that we use as grains in everyday culinary use? Sarah?
Barley, wheatberry, rye, corn, rice.
Awesome. That's a lot of them. Anybody else want to add to that? Cheyenne?
Quinoa.
Quinoa? Yeah. David?
Oats.
Oats? Yeah, that's great. What else?
Sorghum.
Sorghum? Awesome.
Amaranth.
Okay. Yeah. Buckwheat. What'd you say?
Amaranth.
Amaranth? Okay, so you guys are on top of it. You guys are familiar with your grains. I'm feeling really good about this. There are some of the examples, and you guys listed many more than that. Okay, now the video was a good reminder of this, but what I want to do is have us as a group fill in all the blanks here on the board. So first, let's start with the two types of grains that we see on the screen. The one right here closest to me, what do we have?
Whole grain.
That's a whole grain, and furthest from me, what do we have? Refined grain, perfect. Okay, and then we've got the three components of both. The three components of the whole grain, which is husk is actually removed. It's the inedible part. So what's below the husk? Bran, yeah, exactly. Okay, and then here the big white part in the middle that makes up about 80% of the grain. Endosperm. Okay, and this guy right here? The germ. Okay, and then over here, we've only got one thing left because we got rid of everything else, right? Do you guys remember what we call that process of getting rid of everything else? Yeah, refinement. Okay, so we took a whole grain, we turned it into a refined grain, and we ended up with which part remaining? Endosperm. Awesome. You guys are definitely on top of it. Okay, so there's the answers. You guys nailed. All right, grain processing. Whoops. We talked about this. A whole grain has what? How many components? Three. Awesome. Okay. A refined grain. Just the endosperm. Okay. And a milled grain. Yeah, crushed up grains, right? Now, this is one of the misconceptions that I saw in the homework, so I want to just review this briefly. Just remember that a refined grain can actually be, a milled grain can actually be milled from either a refined or a whole grain. Okay? So a few people put in the homework that a milled grain is made from a refined grain. Now, that's often the case, right? If we look at all-purpose flour, probably the most common milled grain that we use in the kitchen, all-purpose flour is milled from a refined grain, right? Because it's a white flour, meaning that it only has the endosperm remaining. Okay? Now, what about brown rice flour? Anybody heard of brown rice flour or used brown rice flour before? What kind of things would you use brown rice flour for? Yeah, yes.
I think brown rice pasta.
Okay, yeah, perfect for making gluten-free pasta. That's a great example. Okay, and that would be an example of something that's milled, but it's milled from a whole grain, not from a refined grain. Okay, so when we look at milling, it can come from either source. Good on that? Excellent. Okay, starches and grains. This is going to be a really important one today for your project because you guys are going to be thinking about how those starches behave in the cooking process, and that's going to inform what you decide to do with your group when you're getting creative with your grains. So, actually, before we go into this, does anybody remember the two primary types of grains that we find in, yeah, go ahead.
Amylose.
Yeah?
And the other one would be amylopectin.
Amylopectin and amylose. Perfect. Okay, so let's start with the amylose. What are some characteristics that you guys remember about amylose? Either from the reading or the videos or from the previous class that we had. Sarah?
If it's like rice, it's more fluffy and less, it doesn't really clump together as much, so we typically do like long grain rice.
Okay, yeah, so more fluffy, it doesn't clump together. And the clumping is a result of the starches bonding to one another, right? So it likes to stay separate and individual. Okay? Anybody know of any other characteristics you can think of? What about the shape of the starch itself? Audrey?
Like it's more linear as opposed to amylopectin is like branched.
Exactly, perfect. Okay, so what do we have? Less sticky, more fluffy, does not gel in water, and the structure is rod-like or in a straight line. Now, when you think about these starches, remember that they apply to not just grains, but starches in general. So if you're trying to kind of wrap your head around it, think about a potato, right? Has anybody ever noticed that there's a different texture between a baking potato, an Idaho baked potato, fluffy and lighter, versus a waxy potato like a red bliss potato? Entirely different texture, right? Well, a red bliss potato is going to be higher in amylopectin in terms of its starch content. An Idaho or a russet potato is going to be higher in amylose in terms of its starch content. Okay, so this applies to starches across the board. So think about this when you're applying that knowledge of what you know about starches from cooking rice to cooking anything, right? And that stuff should transfer over. Okay, so characteristics of amylopectin: more sticky, more creamy, does form a gel in water, and the structure is branched like a tree, like Audrey mentioned. You guys feel good about this slide? Comfortable with all that information? Great. Okay. This is the last major part of our review, and this is really important for the lab session that we're going to have tomorrow when you're doing your production practical. Okay. So, does anybody just want to yell out what cooking methods they remember from the last class? Cheyenne.
The absorption method.
Absorption. Okay, that's one.
The Pilaf method.
Okay, peel-off method. We've got two. David.
Risotto.
Risotto method. We've got three. Audrey.
Boiling.
Boiling method. We've got four. Are we missing any? We're good, right? Absorption, peel off, boiling, risotto. when we talk about the absorption method, what do? Somebody walk me through it. You're making a pot of white rice. At this point, we've all done white rice, right? So that's our baseline knowledge. How do I do it? How do I make white rice with absorption cooking? It's written up there, so you gotta look at this. Sarah.
So it's gonna be like a ratio of water and rice,
Yeah.
and you boil the water, you add the rice, and then you cover it, and you just let the rice absorb all the water. And when it's all absorbed, it's done.
Perfect, perfect. And the key there is set ratio, right? Because if we add too much water in the absorption method, we're gonna end up with rice soup. And if we add too little, we're gonna serve crunchy half raw rice. Neither of those are our goal, right? Okay, pilaf method, what do you guys remember about that? Sometimes referred to as rice braising. Yeah.
I remember you like heat up the rice and like you also put your aromatics in there.
Yeah. And when you heat them up, what are you using to heat them up?
You fat.
You're using fat, yeah. And so when we talk in the kitchen about fats, are we talking about cooking in liquid, or are we talking about dry heat? Dry heat, even liquid fat, we're still talking about dry heat, right? Because it's not a water-based liquid. Okay? Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay, boiling, what's the method there? What do? Sarah?
I kind of think about like pasta, like you have a lot of water boiling, you add your grains, and then when they're done cooking, you strain them off or you take them out.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think about ratios there?
No real ratio.
Yeah, not important, right? Because we're going to drain the water away. And if we're trying to make a rice where we have the least amount of stickiness possible, this is the best approach. Any idea why? Shane?
Because the rice won't stick together, it doesn't have room to bounce around.
Yeah, because when it's cooking, it's moving around, right? What about what happened to that surface starch on the rice? Where did that go in the process? Yeah, go ahead.
It leached into the water.
Yeah, and then where the water go? Away, right? Down the drain. So we took a lot of the surface starch and we rinsed it off. So if you're trying to make fried rice, for example, right? If you're trying to make fried rice, the last thing you want is everything sticking together. So a really good method, so a lot of times fried rice is made with yesterday's rice. It's stale and the surface is dried out, right? Sometimes you don't have yesterday's rice, but you need fried rice today. A really good method is to use the boiling method to rinse that surface starch off so that that rice isn't going to stick together, and then you can go and refry it for that second cooking process. And that'll do a lot to get rid of the surface starch on the rice. Okay? Last method. Doug, any ideas?
I can read it.
Sure, go for it.
Grain is first cooked using dry heat, then water-based liquid is added slowly in small increments while constantly stirring the grain with a wooden spoon, like my grandmother said.
Perfect. Why do you think a wooden spoon? Other than grandma says. Anybody else have an idea why grandma might recommend a wooden spoon? Sarah?
Because if you use like a sharp edge spoon, it might break apart the
Yeah, exactly right. It's rounded on the edge, it's soft and gentle, and it has a tendency not to break the grains, the individual grains of rice. Okay? All right, so again, the grain is first cooked using dry heat, right? That means we're toasting it in fat, and then we're adding liquid in small increments. What do you guys think about ratios for risotto? Any thoughts on that? Charlie?
Do you just use as much water as you need to make it?
Exactly. Yeah, we're less concerned about ratios here because the evaporation process plays a huge role in the risotto cooking process, right? Because we're stirring uncovered the whole time. So if I'm using a pot this wide or a pot this wide, it's going to change the amount of liquid that I need to use because of the amount of evaporation that happens in the cooking process. All right, so this is really, really fundamental because this is what you guys are going to be applying to your new grains today. Is everybody comfortable with the 4 methods of cooking rice, or cooking grains? Yeah? Yes, chef?
Yes, chef.
Great. Okay, so misconceptions from the homework, we already talked about one of them. The second one that I noticed, these are the only 2 things that I saw problems with for the most part. You guys did a great job on the homework assignment. The only other misconception is that some people were confused about the idea that we could actually have both amylose and amylopectin just in different percentages or quantities depending on the type of grain. Okay, so when you're researching your assigned grade today, look for the predominant starch type as opposed to every element of the starch that's in there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Jeff.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, great. next class. Okay, so we're gonna go through just the basics because I want you guys for homework tonight to actually think about this and maybe come up with some ideas and brainstorm. Now, you're gonna have a mystery ingredient, so you can't write your recipe ahead of time or you can't really plan, but you can kind of wrap your head around the concept and come in here ready to hit the ground running. Okay, so you guys are going to work in teams. Your teams are going to be assigned by picking a number on a hat, so they will be random, but you guys will need to work together, and you guys know that that's an important part of being in the kitchen. So when you come in next class, what I'm going to do is a uniform inspection at the door on your way in, and as you come in, you can do the inspection and then grab a number, and the number will align with the table where you're going to be working, okay? All right, so each team will be assigned a new grain that we have not used in class before. The world is our oyster because we've only used rice in class so far. So you're going to get something that's not rice, and that's all that I want to tell you about. But any other grain is fair game, okay? The first thing that you're going to do is complete a handout about that grain. I'm going to give you that when you come in next week for class, okay? You're going to complete the handout, and the handout basically just requires you to do a little bit of research about your grain so that you can come up with the best possible way to prepare it, okay? Your team will then create and execute a recipe for this grain to share with the class. Okay, so create meaning that you're not going to go into your textbook or you're not going to go onto Google and copy a recipe. You're going to come up with your own recipe. All right? Now remember that you're applying a grain cooking method that we've already seen before. So it's not like you're starting from scratch. You're going to say, all right, my grain, somebody give me a grain. Oats, great. So my grain is oats. I've done my research on oats. I think this about the starch, I think this about the gluten, I think this about the structure, and I'm going to apply the boiling method. So now, you guys know the boiling method. So it's not like you're writing a recipe from scratch. You're going to say, I'm going to take my 1 cup of oats, my ½ cup of minced shallots, whatever it is, and you're going to apply that method to the recipe that you're doing. Okay? You're going to have a worksheet to fill the recipe in on so you don't have to worry about formatting. The formatting's taken care of. Okay? And then once you've written the recipe, you can execute it. What I mean by that is make it, right? Now, next class I'm going to give you guys some tips on how to make sure that your recipe and your finished dish actually align with each other. But just keep in mind that you are actually going to be making the recipes that you create in class. Okay? All right, then you're going to have to do a presentation and you're going to have to explain to everybody that, so for me it's oats. I made boiled oats. I chose the boiling method because these are the things about oats that make boiling the right method for cooking. Does that make sense? So you guys are going to come up in front of the class and you're going to explain that while you're presenting your dish. Okay? And that's everything. So that's going to be the group project. So what we're going to do is we'll meet next week. You'll come in. You'll get your team assignment right away. And then I'd like you to just go to your stations. Go ahead and set them up for the day. Once you have your stations set up, I want you to come meet me around the demo table right at the beginning of class tomorrow. And we'll take it from there. Okay? Great. So if you guys can just put your chairs away, you are dismissed. Thank you.